Good evening, everyone. This video is going to consist of 5 videos rather than 10. It's going to be along the same length as a normal video usually is, but these stories are more compact, they're longer, more in-depth. You may enjoy them more than the typical stories that we get. I hope you guys have a fantastic time listening, as much as I did reading them. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and thank you for all the love and support. I've been browsing this sub recently while recovering from COVID and wanted to share my only paranormal experience because it still scares the bejesus out of me. I'm broadly a skeptic, but I have no explanation for this one. Years ago, I joined my friends on a road trip to a cabin near a ski town in New Mexico. The cabin was owned by a friend's grandmother, but it's just a vacation home and hadn't been occupied in months. It's a small 2-story home situated on a hill in the woods with a few other homes scattered in the vicinity. The area had experienced heavy snowfall prior to our arrival, and so everything was freshly covered in a deep layer of snow. It was already nighttime when we arrived. Everyone started partying upstairs, but I was exhausted from the trip, so I went downstairs to read a book. The downstairs room was a small living room with a couch that faced a wall-length window. The blinds were up, but it was pitch black outside, so I couldn't see anything if I tried. Next to the window was a double door, an inner screen door that opened inwards, and an exterior door that opened outwards. We didn't use this entrance at all because we came in through the garage, so it was still locked. It was probably about 10 or 11 p.m. when this happened. I laid out on the couch and started reading, but it didn't take long before I started feeling off. That feeling you get when something is watching you. Small waves of goosebumps. Your hair stands up a bit, your heart beats faster, and you feel that instinct to peer around your surroundings for danger. I could still hear my friends laughing and joking right above me, so I tried ignoring the feeling. I was there for probably 30 minutes trying to shake it. All of a sudden, the screen door slams inward. I mean, slams so loudly that everyone upstairs suddenly cut off their conversation. I jumped up from the couch in shock and froze. The downstairs and asked what happened, and I assumed that they were fucking with me. Nope. They were all accounted for, and again, the exterior door was locked. It couldn't have been opened from the outside anyway. One of my friends turned on the exterior floodlights. Footsteps. Giant, deep footsteps, trudging directly from the woods up to the window and clearly stopped at the window, facing where I had been lying on the couch. Then the footsteps trailed over to the door and then turned back out to the woods. We had no explanation. We couldn't tell if any of it was a human or animal or something else, but whatever it was had clearly watched me from that window and kicked the screen door through a closed door. Nothing happened after that for the whole rest of the trip, nor has anything like that happened again in my life. But I still feel super uncomfortable around uncovered windows at night. That feeling of being watched is and will always be so powerful. I'll preface this by saying I'm gonna leave identifying information out of this post for the sake of the privacy of the people living there now since I no longer live in this home. This happened almost 7 years ago, but I remember every detail like it was yesterday. I lived in a 150-year-old house, according to the landlord, for 6 months-ish, while my family were renovating our home. It was a very old house with a creepy basement and a hidden second staircase behind the kitchen. There were 4 bedrooms, 2 vacant, the one I slept in, and the one my parents slept in. The one my parents slept in had a walk-in closet with a window in it where you could look through and see the top of the stairs. I thought it was strange, and it'll be an important detail later. We moved in when I was around 15-ish, or I had just turned 15. The memories are a little foggy. The first instance of activity I can remember was the night I moved in, and it was passive, as I'd call it. I remember sitting up alone in my room after unpacking a couple boxes, and I was listening to a CD on this old stereo my parents had bought. My parents were downstairs watching TV. I remember everything being fine. It was late, and it was dark. The only light on upstairs was my room. The hall was pitch black. I must add that I have never been scared of the dark, except for when I was a young child. I remember pausing my music because I thought I heard footsteps and thought my dad was coming up the stairs to tell me to turn it down. He did that a lot, but I still heard him talking to my mother downstairs. It felt, though, like someone was standing in the doorway, and I remember feeling extremely unsettled. The feeling didn't leave me, and I sat there for a solid 5 minutes, putting my music back on to try to ease my mind, but it still felt distinctly like someone was standing there, staring at me in the doorway. I couldn't see anyone, though. I remember getting so spooked that I hurried downstairs and joined my parents in the living room. I said that I felt creeped out, and my mother said that it was probably just us being in a new place, and I'd settle down and get used to it eventually. Bearing in mind, this was my first ever experience to the paranormal, and I had never felt like this before. I was convinced that someone was upstairs, but my parents brushed it off. This sort of thing persisted for a few days, but only when I was somewhere alone. My mother refuses to talk about the house, so I've never found out if either of my parents had the same experiences. But given her defensiveness on it, I'd presume they did. Less passive things started happening after this. At first, I dismissed it. Things like the pool balls on the table being moved when I returned to the games. Even when I knew I put them in their little triangle formation for the game. But when I'd come back, they'd be scattered across the table, like someone broke them and started the game. Small things would go missing and reappear somewhere else or move very slightly, but just nuisance things like that. Things one could disregard. This persisted for a while, and I didn't tell my parents about it because I didn't think anything of it. I remember when things got more intense, I'd start to get chills right before something would happen. The room would go freezing cold for no explainable reason. The house had many draughts, but it wasn't enough to take the room from lukewarm to freezing cold in a matter of seconds. Then something would happen, like an object would fall, or I'd hear a noise and the room would go back to being warm again, like nothing had changed. The first time I felt truly scared was when I woke up in my bed in the middle of the night and I felt like something was staring at me. I always slept with my door shut, and it felt like a stranger was standing in my room over me, watching me sleep. I had a shelf of books and various ornaments above my head. My bed was against the wall, and I remember 3 of them falling on my legs and feet, one after the other, and then everything went quiet again. Nothing else happened that night, and I fell back asleep with difficulty. I'd hear tapping on my door at various points in the night, and I was awake for a couple of those occasions. One night, I couldn't fall asleep, and I heard 3 taps on my door, very quiet, like someone tapped a single fingernail against the door 3 times. There was one night where this happened multiple times, but the tapping would always come in 3s. Then it would be silent for about half an hour, and then I'd hear it again. In those beginning 3 weeks, looking back on it, the activity was like your standard haunting, just nuisance and creepy things. But it was about a month into living there that things got super intense for me, and quite honestly, really fucking scary. It was like the intensity scale went from 0 to 100 within a few days. At least that's what it felt like. It was such a drastic change from the odd disturbance to actual violent events that I couldn't explain. One evening, I was in the house alone, only for about an hour. I was rarely ever in the house alone. There was always such a foul feeling about it, and I felt unsafe ever being there by myself at this point. My family had to be there, or else I'd go as far as waiting out by the back door until they got home from work in my school uniform. I felt entirely on edge the entire time. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't focus on homework or the TV, music, nothing. I kept feeling that same feeling like something was watching me, but it felt worse somehow because I was alone. I couldn't run to anyone to feel better. It was just me and this thing. I remember I was trying to focus on some TV and the room went cold, and I was instantly like, oh shit, what do I do? By now I had figured out that what I was dealing with was a spirit. I was very familiar with the concept of ghosts and hauntings, but I didn't believe in any of it until I moved into this place. I remember the movie was just ending and the screen went dark. On the credits screen, and I could see my own reflection in the TV. And I saw something rush behind me, past me, and presumably through the door into the kitchen. You had to walk through the living room to get to the kitchen. It was like a tall, black, smoky figure, but it had no distinguishing shape. Like a humanoid figure, it was almost like a bundle of half-transparent black smoke that just shot past in half a second. Seriously, one blink and I'd have missed it. I'm not gonna say I acted tough at that moment, or that I was brave or anything. I just burst into tears because I was so scared. And somehow, seeing it made all of my fears a reality that I couldn't pass off as excuses anymore. My parents didn't believe a word, so I stopped telling them anything. And they didn't help, making me think I was delusional and crazy. I saw it a total of 4 separate occasions. The second being when I was in the walk-in closet in my parents' bedroom, looking for something. I can't remember what it was, but I remember peeking out of that weird window I told you about earlier and seeing a black shadow for a few seconds on the stairs, and it just faded. The third occasion was a tall black mist standing still in the corner of my room. I woke up and I felt paralyzed. That was my first instance ever of sleep paralysis, and I remember seeing it in my peripheral vision, standing in the corner of my room until I regained consciousness in my body, I guess. And when I could move, I turned to face it, and it had disappeared. This one you might be able to discount as a hallucination because I know people experience those during sleep paralysis. So take that one with a grain of salt. The fourth and final time I saw it fully was in the kitchen. I was writing out a French exam, I'm pretty sure, or something to do with French class, and I turned and saw it rush through the kitchen door into the living room. I don't know why I saw it. I don't know if it was showing itself to me, because I have never seen another spirit and have lived in multiple haunted homes. The worst experience, however, there's two that tie hand in hand with the foulest experiences in this house, which convinced me that this thing did not have good intentions. I felt touches and what felt like light shoves sometimes, especially when I was on the stairs. I'd feel like a cold, icy breeze against my shoulder, like something was running their hand really quickly across my skin. The worst day for me was when I was upstairs alone. I went into the third bedroom. It was the first bedroom, to a door on the right at the top of the stairs. It was used as a storage room, and that room was always cold, freezing even. Even if you stuck a heater in there, it would not warm up. But I remember I went into that room and started rifling through boxes. I was looking for something, and I remember sitting back because I could smell something rotten. Not like that sickly, moldy, sweet smell that's like rotten food or fruit. If you've ever smelt a dog food box that's exploded and left to go moldy, you will know the type of smell I'm talking about. It was absolutely putrid, and it came out of nowhere. And I just remember a box at the end of the room shaking gently back and forth. And I looked at it, and it was just a box of books. It wasn't anything significant, just a random storage box. Trying not to be sick at the same time as watching this. Mind you, the smell was making me gag every other second, and I was just glued to my spot on the floor, watching this box move on its own. And the feeling in that room was so heavy. It was like the air was physically pressing down on my skin and my chest, and it was hard to breathe. I couldn't think. All I could feel was anger and fear. I don't even know where the anger came from. Maybe being angry at this point was making me feel threatened in my own home. I'm not sure. I remember the box slid a few centimeters. It didn't slide by much, but after it slid, it was still, and the smell just faded out. But that entire day, I felt like something was almost sitting on my shoulders. My entire body felt so heavy, and I felt so tired and grouchy. And I was lashing out at everyone around me in this blind anger I couldn't explain. And I went to bed early because I felt so tired. And I remember waking up the next morning, and I had 3 lovely bright red scratches across the top of my arm. And I just knew I didn't do them. The entire remainder of the time, I stayed there, and for quite some time after, I couldn't shake this heavy feeling I had. It always felt like I had a chain strapped to my ankle. Every breath, every step felt heavy. I was so tired and depressed all the time. Ever since that day in the room with the box, it's like everything changed. Everything was flipped upside down, and my happiness tanked. Even 6 years later, shit isn't the same. For some context to us moving, me and my family were moving between states with our 2 dogs. We stopped in Tombstone, Arizona, and we're staying there for the night. At some point in the day, a man sitting on a bench across the street from the store stops us and says to look up to a window because you could see a silhouette of a ghost. I was the only one who didn't see it. Later on, we go to our hotel, and the next morning, my brother and mom both said that they woke up in the middle of the night in sleep paralysis and saw a figure in our room. Fast forward some, we get to our new house for a few years, eventually get a 3rd dog, and while living there, the others claim they saw some paranormal events, some at home, some out around town, or off the side of roads. Again, I never saw or felt the presence of anything. So, finally, we're moving to our current residence. This is when I absolutely experienced something paranormal. Before I say what I felt, I'll talk about what I didn't have. Our 3 dogs weren't with us at the time, but were either at a pet hotel or at an apartment one of my parents was at. I cannot recall whether we had slept in our current house at this point. I know for certain that we had only just begun unpacking, and I only had my bed unpacked. We didn't have Wi-Fi. There was nothing for me to do at home. And even though I was a sophomore in high school, I didn't have my own cell phone. I hadn't even started attending my new school yet. So, my parents and brother decided they wanted to go to jiu-jitsu class. They already knew I didn't care to go, but they asked me one more time if I'd like to go to just watch. I once again declined. If I had the foresight to realize we didn't have Wi-Fi, I probably would have just gone with them. I'm not too sure why my mother didn't leave her phone for me, because in my older houses, this was something that happened a few times. It was already pretty late in the day. Alright, to the story. I'm now home alone. No dogs, no entertainment, no Wi-Fi, no phone. Well, I had a 3DS, but not my charger. I'm playing games for a bit when I notice it's about to die. Realize I left my charger in the car. My fun is now over. I can't recall what I'm doing, but for about 10 minutes I'm slowly getting bored. Something starts to feel off, but I brush it off as being in a new house all alone. It was a very quiet night. I was sitting on my bed listening to the echo of the highway a few miles out. Normally, I can't hear it when the AC is turned on, but when it's turned off and dead quiet in my house, I can hear it. So the only things I can hear is the echo of a distant highway and the gentle ringing of the oncoming tinnitus. Then, I hear a footstep. It sounded like something was walking on carpet. There's just this distinct noise to it. The door to my room was wide open, but even if it was closed, I would have heard the footstep. And even if I did close it, I couldn't lock it. Every doorway in my hall was open right now. I'm sitting here, frozen in place. What felt like a minute goes by, and I hear another footstep. It's undeniable that I'm hearing a footstep. I slowly start to stand up and very cautiously make my way to the bathroom. When I walk out into my door frame, the feeling that something is wrong starts to flood into me. I don't move at all. I'm just standing there, waiting. When I hear a third footstep, I quickly dart for the bathroom across the hall and close the door, locking it. For a few minutes, I don't hear anything. Then, I hear another footstep. This time, it immediately gets followed up by another one, then another. I can roughly tell where it is, and I hear it walk up to the bathroom door. At this point, I was convinced that there was someone in the house. For the next few minutes, there would be quick bursts of footsteps, as if someone was speed walking between rooms, stopping for a minute, and then moving to the next room. Sometimes, it stopped in front of the bathroom door. It was like a louder, constant movement. This goes on for a few minutes. I knew that if there was a person in my house, I probably couldn't fight them off. For some reason, I decided to say, "Go away." The next time the footsteps came up to the door, at this point, I was getting annoyed while still very scared. There was a prolonged period of silence before it moved to another room. It comes back, and I go, "You better leave right now." Silence. It moves to another room. The final time I say something, I say, "Leave me alone," and it goes away. I could still hear it moving around the hall and going to the different bedrooms, but it seemed to have stopped waiting at the bathroom door. It also was back to slower footsteps, as if someone was trying to be quiet. Eventually, the footsteps walked away and sounded like they went somewhere else in the house. I quit hearing them for the remainder of the night. I was too scared of what happened and stayed in my bathroom. Overall, I think I heard something walking for about 45-ish minutes. When my parents came home, they were gone for about 2.5 hours. I explained what happened, and we checked the entire house, after which everyone claimed it must have been a ghost. They were all surprised at how shaky I was, and that I looked pale. To this day, I'm still skeptical on what really happened. Never witnessed or heard anything paranormal like this by myself prior. For the past few years living here, others in my family have experienced and seen things, even footsteps. I haven't had any more encounters though. So, I am from Virginia and currently live on the border of Virginia and West Virginia. My entire life, I have experienced the paranormal, from dealing with ghosts and shadow people at a security job to dealing with an inhuman being at a retail job. I have seen it all, but lately, I'm experiencing something new. Being from the mountains, I have been aware of H-ants, boogans, and, of course, the fair folk. Thankfully, I've never had to deal with the latter until now. As of late, I've started hearing small sing-song voices crying outside, seen flashes of silver, and I've noticed small knickknacks and collectibles disappearing and reappearing. I keep a broom at the front of my back door, circle my house with salt, use oil on every door frame, and have a cross or religious symbol in every room. We literally live right next to a giant sinkhole that my neighbor has heard growling from before. I'm not looking for advice for getting rid of anything or help dealing with it, since it isn't really an issue and we don't feel threatened. I just thought it might be fun to share the new experience. I have encountered the paranormal my entire life, but recently, I've had new experiences with the fair folk. I had a weird experience last night. I have had paranormal experiences in the past, but this was my longest encounter with an entity, spirit, ghost, whichever you may call it. For context, I live on my grandma's house. My grandpa passed away about 10 years ago from lung cancer. So, any paranormal activity in this house, we usually assume it's him. Things moving, cigarette smoke, hearing our names being called, always a friendly presence. My little sister lives with us too, and she's 14. She's really sensitive to spirits and says she's always here. But there are 2 other spirits in this house as well. Anyways, I was lying on my back in my bed down in my bedroom in the basement and was just about to close my eyes when something caught my eye on the ceiling. So I was looking at it because it was moving, and I was honestly shocked. Thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but there was a figure moving across the ceiling right above my bed. I get rubbing my eyes thinking I'm just overtired and seeing things, but it was still there. I laid there for 5 minutes looking at it, just hovering and kind of swirling around on the ceiling. I turned my light on and it was gone. Then I was freaking myself out, so I turned my laptop on and started to watch Netflix. Then I decided to go to bed again and turned the light off, and my curiosity got the best of me. So I looked back up at the ceiling, and the swirling shadow was gone. I could see the lighter shadow on my dresser cast against the wall from the light of my window, but the darker, swirling thing was gone. Very interesting experience, because I did genuinely think there was something there. Not a threatening presence, but I did feel weird. I've seen a shadow before, but it was more human shaped and it went away very quickly. This thing lingered for a while. Anyways, I believe in everything paranormal. Just curious if anyone had a similar experience. Thank you everyone for listening. If your story was told, I'm glad I'm the one who could tell it. I appreciate all the love and support. I hope you enjoyed today's stories as much as I did reading them.